Have you ever stopped to ask yourself why, with everything you know, with everything you have tried, with all the effort and the discipline and the moments of genuine hope that you have brought to your financial life, the ceiling is still there? Not a wall, a ceiling. Because a wall you can walk away from. A ceiling sits on top of everything you build. Every time something starts to move, the ceiling is there. Every time a little light comes in, the ceiling dims it. And you have been staring up at it for long enough now that a part of you has started to wonder whether it is permanent. Whether this is simply the shape of your financial life. Whether the people who seem to live without that ceiling above them were given something at the start that you were not. I want to sit in that question with you for a moment, not rush past it, not cover it with a motivational statement about your potential. The question deserves to be held because the answer to it, the real answer, not the surface one, is the reason you are here today and the reason what I am about to share with you is going to matter in a way that most of what you have heard about money and poverty and financial change has not. The real answer is this. The ceiling you have been living under is not made of your circumstances. It is not made of your effort level or your intelligence or the cards the world dealt you. The ceiling is a spiritual condition, and a spiritual condition requires a spiritual instrument. Every practical tool you have applied to it, the budgets, the side incomes, the positive thinking, the goal setting, those tools are real and they are not wrong, but they are physical tools being applied to a non-physical problem. And the tradition I have lived inside for 38 years has always known this. The sages did not treat poverty as a mathematical problem. They treated it as a condition with a name, with a root cause, and with a specific prescribed treatment. And the instrument they prescribed, the one that has been used in conditions of genuine financial darkness for over 3,000 years, is a psalm. One specific psalm, the one I am going to give you today. I am Rabbi Naomi, 38 years inside the living tradition. My grandfather was a man who rebuilt twice, who lost everything twice, and brought his family back from genuine poverty twice in a single lifetime, and who attributed neither rebuilding to luck, to connections, or to effort alone. He was precise about what he credited. He credited the morning practice, the specific psalms at the specific times with the specific intention. He said, Naomi, the practical work is what you do after the channel is open. The psalm is how you open the channel. I have been teaching that principle for 38 years, and I have watched it work in real lives under real pressure, in ways that the strictly practical approach could not account for. Stay with me until the very end of this video. The final instruction, the one I always place last, is the one that makes every other instruction in this teaching functional. Without it, you will have 3/4 of the practice, and 3/4 of this practice is the same as none of it. Before we go further, I want you to type the words, "The ceiling is coming down," in the comments right now. Not as wishful thinking, as a declaration of what you are choosing to believe before the evidence is fully visible. The ancient teachers understood that declaration precedes manifestation, that the spoken and written word, placed into a public space with genuine intention behind it, creates a spiritual alignment with what is being called in. Type it now, then come back. Let me tell you about a man I worked with not long ago. He was 53 years old, had run a small printing business for 19 years, and was, by every external measure, a competent, hard-working, decent man who had simply never broken through a very specific financial level. He was not failing, the business ran, the family was fed, but the ceiling was there, and it had been there for as long as he could remember, and in the last 2 years it had started to feel less like a ceiling and more like a slowly descending weight. He came to me through a mutual acquaintance, quite secular, slightly skeptical, the kind of man who describes himself as practical. The first thing he said to me was, "I do not really believe in this kind of thing." The second thing he said was, "But I have tried everything else." I said to him, "Good. Skepticism is not a barrier. Honesty is. If you are honest with me about what has and has not worked, and if you are willing to apply what I give you with precision, even while you remain skeptical, then we have something to work with." We spent the first session not talking about the business at all. I asked him about his mornings. He told me. I asked him about his relationship to the word poverty, whether he had ever heard it applied to his family when he was growing up. He went quiet for a long moment. He said, "My father used to say we were one bad month away from poverty, every month, for as long as I can remember." I said, "And how many months have you spent in your adult life feeling like you were one bad month away from poverty?" He said, "All of them." I said, "Then the ceiling has a name, and it is not a financial name. It is an inherited spiritual condition that has been running in your life since before you had any say in the matter. And there is a psalm for this, specifically for this." I gave him the psalm, the 82nd. I gave him the precise instructions for how to read it, when to read it, and what to do in the moments immediately before and immediately after. He applied it, not with belief, he told me later, but with what he called diligent skepticism. He did what I told him, exactly as I told him, for 3 consecutive days. On the 4th day, he called me. He did not call to tell me that a large financial event had occurred. He called to tell me that something had shifted in how he was moving through the day, that he had made 3 decisions in 2 days that he described as clearer than any decisions he had made in years. Decisions he had been circling for months that suddenly had obvious answers. Within 6 weeks of those decisions, the ceiling had moved, not vanished, moved. The business crossed a threshold it had been approaching and retreating from for 4 years. The man who had described himself as practical called me and said, "I do not know how to explain this." I said, "You do not need to. You just need to keep reading." I want to break apart 3 things you have probably believed about Psalms and about poverty and about what a spiritual practice can actually do for a material problem. Because these beliefs are the myths that stand between you and the full power of what I am about to give you. The first myth is this, that Psalms are devotional literature, beautiful, meaningful, spiritually nourishing, but ultimately in a separate category from the practical work of changing your financial circumstances. This is the belief that separates the sacred from the secular in a way that the tradition itself never did. The people who assembled the Book of Psalms were not poets preserving emotional records for future readers to find comfort in. They were architects. The Hebrew language is not a container for meaning. It is a generator of meaning, in which every letter carries a numerical value, every word carries multiple simultaneous layers of significance, and the specific sequence of letters in a specific passage creates a specific effect in the spiritual dimension that then propagates into the physical one. David did not write the 82nd Psalm to describe how he felt about poverty. He wrote it as a precise instrument for confronting the spiritual mechanics that produce and sustain poverty in a human life. The tradition preserved it for exactly that purpose. When you read it as devotional literature, you are receiving perhaps a tenth of what it carries. When you read it as the instrument it was built to be, with the understanding of its mechanism, with the precision of its application, with the intention of someone who knows what they are using and why, you are receiving the whole thing. The second myth is that poverty is a financial condition and therefore has a financial solution. I understand why this belief exists. It is logical, it is measurable, it maps onto the world in a way that feels controllable. But the tradition has a more precise diagnosis. The word the ancient teachers used for poverty, aniyut, is rooted in a Hebrew word that means to be bowed down, to be bent. Not empty, bent. A person in the condition of aniyut is not a person who lacks resources in some abstract sense. They are a person whose inner posture has been shaped, often over years and sometimes over generations, into a bowing, a bending away from the provision that is available. The provision does not disappear. The channel through which it flows becomes blocked by the specific shape that fear and inherited scarcity thinking press the soul into over time. This is why effort alone does not lift the ceiling. You can exert enormous effort while bent, but bent effort does not open the channel. It exhausts the person. The psalm straightens the posture. That is its function, not to attract money from nowhere, but to restore the upright position from which the channel of provision naturally flows. The third myth is the one that damages people most, that a spiritual practice requires an absence of doubt in order to work. That if you are skeptical, if you are not sufficiently devout, if you come to the psalm from a place of desperation rather than a place of settled faith, the practice will not function for you. This is precisely backward. The tradition teaches that the most powerful use of the psalm of advocacy, the psalm that stands before the spiritual economy and demands that provision flow to those who need it, is made by a person in genuine need. Not a person performing need, not a person in intellectual discussion about poverty, a person who is actually in the condition the psalm was written to address. David did not write the 82nd Psalm from a place of settled wealth and uncomplicated faith. He wrote it from inside the darkness, and the darkness is in the psalm. It is fuel for the psalm. Your doubt does not diminish the instrument. Your honest need activates it. Here is the proof that runs through the tradition in 3 layers. The first layer is historical. I have spoken in previous teachings about the Sephardic community of Salonika, the 200,000 Jews expelled from Spain in 1492, who arrived in the Ottoman Empire with nothing and rebuilt within a single generation into the dominant commercial presence in the Mediterranean. The morning psalm practice was not peripheral to that rebuilding. It was described by the rabbinical authorities of the community as the foundation of it. The rabbis designated the specific psalms that addressed each stage of the community's condition: the psalm for protection in the first days of destitution, the psalm for the reopening of the channel once they had shelter, and the psalm for the condition of aniyut when the bent posture threatened to become permanent. The 82nd was in that sequence. It was read every morning before the market opened, before a single transaction was conducted, by people in real poverty, applying a real instrument to a real problem. And the generation that followed them did not live in poverty. The second layer of proof is personal. I have observed this psalm work in the lives of people I have worked with closely for nearly 4 decades. I have watched it produce the specific pattern I described in the story I told earlier. Not an overnight miracle, not a financial event that defies explanation, but a shift in clarity and decision quality within 48 to 72 hours that then compounds into measurable financial movement within 4 to 6 weeks. I have observed this pattern consistently enough that I no longer treat it as possibility. I treat it as principle. The psalm opens the channel. The open channel produces clearer thinking. Clearer thinking produces better decisions. Better decisions produce different outcomes. The chain is logical from beginning to end. The only step that looks unusual is the first one. And the first step is the one that the tradition has been teaching for 3,000 years to people who had every reason to be skeptical and applied it anyway. The third layer is the psalm itself. Read the 82nd without a translator's softening, and it is the most audacious document in the Psalter. God standing in the divine assembly, demanding that the forces governing the distribution of provision do their designated work. The accusation of those forces: how long will you judge unjustly? How long will you fail the weak and the needy? Followed by the most striking final verse in the entire book: Arise, O God, judge the earth. The human voice commanding the divine response, not asking, not petitioning, commanding. This is not arrogance in the tradition's understanding. This is the full standing of a human being who has done their part, who has come to the psalm honestly, who has named the condition precisely and brought it before the spiritual economy with their full presence, and who knows from that position that the response they are calling for is not a favor, but a restoration of the designed order. This is what the psalm puts in your mouth when you read it correctly. This is why it works. Here is the framework: 4 steps, precise, in order. Before you read, write 1 sentence on a piece of paper that names the specific face of your financial condition. Not a general complaint about money, the specific thing. The specific number, the specific door that has not opened, the specific threshold that keeps returning you to the same place. 1 sentence. This is your case. The psalm is a litigation, and a litigation requires a precise claim. Read the psalm 3 times in a single sitting. The first reading for understanding, slow enough that each verse lands before you move to the next. The second reading for identification. Hear your specific situation in every verse. Personalize every line to the case you wrote down. The third reading for declaration. Read it in the voice of someone who has already received what the psalm is demanding. Not performance, prophecy. The tradition teaches that the psalms operate in the eternal present, where the restoration is already accomplished. Read the third time from inside that reality. After the third reading, sit in silence for the count of 72. Hold the paper. Do not read it again. Let the silence be full rather than empty. This is the moment of reception, the breath between the declaration and the manifestation. Sit in it even when it is uncomfortable, especially when it is uncomfortable. Immediately after the silence, before you stand up, before the day resumes, give something from what you have. Small is sufficient. Proportional to your current supply is exactly right. The psalm advocates for the provision of the needy and is most fully activated by the one who reads it when that person becomes, in the same moment, an agent of the principle they are invoking. You cannot call for the channel of provision to open while keeping your own hands closed. Give something, deliberately, from the hands that just held the psalm. Then begin your day. Here is what you will notice in the 24 hours that follow. Not a large event, a first opening, a conversation that surfaces something that had been blocked, a thought that arrives with unusual clarity about a situation that had felt opaque. A door that had been closed that suddenly shows a handle. These are not coincidences. They are the first movement of the stone that has been blocking the passage. Acknowledge each one aloud. I see this, thank you, because the act of acknowledging the first fruit signals to the spiritual dimension that you are a vessel that notices and honors what is given. That signal invites the next movement. And the next. The full resolution of the condition is not a 24-hour event, but the first stone moving in 24 hours is what I have observed consistently in the lives of people who apply this practice with the precision I have given you today. The first stone is always the hardest. Once it moves, the passage opens. One thing remains before we close, and it is the thing I told you I was saving for last. The thing that makes the rest of this functional or leaves it as a meaningful morning that produces nothing by evening. That thing is this: the day after you read the psalm, you must return to it. Not for 3 readings, 1 reading, in the morning, brief and deliberate. The tradition teaches that the channel opened by the psalm is not a permanent structural change in your first application of it. It is an opening that requires reinforcement in the first days, while the new posture becomes established. Think of it this way: a door that has been sealed shut for years will open when the right key is applied. But it will not stay open on its own in the first hours. You must prop it while the hinges relearn their function. The single reading on the day after is the prop. It takes 4 minutes. It is not optional. The people who read the psalm once, experience the first movement, and then return to their previous morning without the psalm. Those are the people who call me 6 weeks later and say it worked for a little while and then stopped. It did not stop. They removed the prop before the door had relearned how to stay open. Return to it the day after, and the day after that if you feel the need. The ceiling does not come down in a single morning, but it begins to come down in the first morning, and it continues coming down every morning you give it the instrument it requires. Tell me in the comments, what is the one word that names the specific ceiling you are bringing to this psalm? Not your whole story. One word: debt, stagnation, fear, ceiling. Whatever the word is that lives at the center of your financial condition right now, name it here. When you name it in this space, among people gathered around the same intention, the weight of it changes. I read every comment. I hold every name that is left here. Next week, I am going to reveal a teaching about a specific object that the wealthiest families in our tradition have kept in a precise location in their homes for generations. Something most people walk past without understanding what it is doing to the financial frequency of the space they live in. Subscribe to this channel now and turn on the notification bell. I release these teachings once. Be there when it arrives. If this video found you at the right moment, if something in what I shared today named something you have been carrying without a name, press the like button. That press sends this teaching to someone else who is sitting under their own ceiling right now and who has been there long enough to wonder if it is permanent. Press it for them. May the psalm you read tomorrow be the key that was always meant for your specific door. May the ceiling that is held for so long begin, in the next 24 hours, its first movement downward. May the channel that was designed for your life reopen, not gradually, not partially, but fully and with the overflow that the tradition has always promised belongs to every prepared vessel. The ceiling is not permanent, it is a condition, and you now have the instrument. Use it. Shalom.